When we speak of alternative energy, many people first think of wind, water, and solar energy. Of course, there are other forms of energy, but these are the ones that most people think of when they try to visualize or imagine what would be a good source of alternative energy. And when people think of wind or wind power, they tend to think of windmills as the sole source of energy that would come from wind. But wind is a powerful element, and it is one that is generated not just by weather, but one that is also generated by human activity. For wind is any air movement, and the way in which that movement can then be used to make energy that can be harnessed. Wind energy can be harnessed fairly directly, as can be seen in the old-style windmills, where the wind was simply acting as the force to move water. But wind can also be used to generate static electricity. Thus, wind can be used in ways that are out of the normal thought patterns. So, since wind is one of the important ways of developing alternative energy, let's imagine a broader perspective of how such can be done. For currently, people are already developing wind farms, and on these farms they place windmills, large windmills that would turn a turbine to generate electric. If you take this into thought, like farming of fruit, then what happens when you take an acreage and you plant it with fruit trees? If you plant large fruit trees, you will get about the same yield as you would get if you were to place smaller fruit trees closer together. And this is the reasoning behind the fact that some orchards actually plant very small fruit trees that can be reached and harvested by humans, rather than by machinery or having to use ladders. The yield is approximately the same, because you can space the little trees closer together, and having a lot of little trees will produce as much fruit as the one big tree that would have grown on the same amount of land. Now, when you think of wind farming and you realize how big some of these windmills are, you can immediately realize that there is a potential to utilize wind as a source of energy in areas using smaller methods of catching the wind in order to have less environmental impact. That is not to say that the big wind farms are not without purpose, for there is good reason for these, for massive amounts of electricity to be generated. But there is also a need at times to generate the same or equal amounts of electricity without having the environmental impact that you have when you build these bigger windmills. This can be done in various ways. Small spinning blades that can be on poles where you would have many blades going up the little poles and then put about, or faux trees, even as you may have seen done on occasion with telephones, antennas. Yes, you can make faux trees and have them have energy collecting wind spinning devices rather than leaves. You can utilize these same type of spinning devices, whether they be blades or whether they seem to be a carousel, or even after the old model of the little water wheel that was simply a tin can with the sides cut into blades. These spin. But if these are manufactured according to current standards and with current abilities, you can, in a very small space, generate a great deal of electricity. Now, the wind that is naturally there is not the only wind that exists, for human activity continually creates wind. Now think of these small things that we have talked about and investing in them alongside high-speed rails, where when the trains go by, they generate a tremendous amount of wind that would thus be generating electric. Envision these on highways where cars continually pass and are continually generating wind, air movement that would be constantly generating electric. And not only that, the road itself can be used as a storage unit. Who would have thought? Yet man wants to run lines here and there when they have what is needed to actually store the energy, for that energy can then also be used again by the very vehicles that would be going over it when you begin using electrical vehicles. For in order to cut the battery weight on those cars, you will surely make them self-charging as they travel. And utilizing the electricity generated by the wind power, you can feed the electricity as storage into the road that is being traveled upon, and then utilizing magnetics, you can have that very power become a source of power for the cars that are driving over it and recharging as they drive over sections of road that are thus powered. So you may also think of wind as something that moves across things. Have you ever noticed how if you put a fan somewhere and allow it to run, it will get dust and dirt building upon it? This is because of the very static created by the blades as they move. And that static is in and of itself a form of electricity being generated. And another possibility with wind is a bladeless turbine, the air moving through such, just as is used with a jet engine, can be used to generate energy. So wind is not just some isolated something that can only be used to run big windmills. Wind can be used in various ways, and even on homes and on office buildings and apartment buildings, wind can be used. For the area of the buildings can be set to collect the wind, so you would be utilizing and generating electric from that wind. Further, you have wind as the earth rotates, and the earth produces a great deal of electricity in its rotation. But the winds that move also create electricity in the atmosphere, and this can be drawn upon and utilized as well. So it is now for you to look at wind not as a limited resource, for at the moment wind is being treated about the way that brain surgery was being treated 6,000 years ago, when brain surgery was usually an act of tribal warfare that occurred with a club, not anything truly helpful. Well, you are about that far advanced in your use of wind at the moment, but wind is a viable and good source of energy if you are willing to develop in the technology and invest in the technology. Of course, it is not just wind that is being thought of in terms of old technologies, for the same is true of solar, and the same is true of hydro power, and the same is true of other sources of energy. We will talk to you about these all in due time, but just think on wind for today, because each idea, each part of the puzzle for how energy can be produced is important, and each deserves its own meditation and its own thought. Yes, yes, yes. Even thinking about construction. What way do you place buildings on a street? Which way does your street run? Can you focus or funnel the air so that you create energy via wind simply by the design of how you build or lay out your city and how you shape your buildings? And then, of course, people have used sailboats for ages, but that just goes to show you how different the capacities are. Because even catching wind is actually storing in essence a form of kinetic energy, because as you catch the wind, it is building and pushing as long as wind continues behind it. Therefore, you can use that whole concept to magnify or increase the power or energy that you gather from wind. So, do not think it is a little topic. It is one of your major resources, but it is one that you must really learn to exploit. We leave you with blessings and with peace. Peace be with each of you as you continue to work to revive and rejuvenate your world.